I've been practicing medicine for over 25 years, and I've seen it. The world is hurting, people are sick, and even with our greatest scientific discoveries and technological breakthroughs, trends in health are not getting better. We weren't designed for this. This world as we know it, it's not our home. But there is a remedy. Our Creator designed us to be resilient creatures, and He's given us clues in the scriptures that have dramatic implication for our lives today. Let's talk about biblical prescriptions. Let's take a serious look at living as God intended. Are you ready? Let's get well, and let's go home.
Welcome to the Biblical Prescriptions for Life podcast. I'm your host, Nick Evanson, and on today's podcast, you'll be hearing a presentation from Dr. James L. Markham, author of the 7-week Bible study program, Biblical Prescriptions for Life, on why we're sick and what we can do about it. As always, the advice given in this podcast is not intended to replace the care of your primary physician, and Dr. Markham insists that listeners talk with their doctors before making changes to their healthcare regimen. If you like what you hear on this podcast, we encourage you to find us online at biblicalprescriptions.com/podcast for a free offer, as well as a discount on the Biblical Prescriptions for Life study materials. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy today's message.
Dear Heavenly Father, we want to invite your presence to speak to each heart here, that it be your words and not our words that lead us. This is our humble prayer. Amen. Well, in thinking about how to sum up 25 years of medicine in 3 30-minute lectures, that was quite a challenge. But before we understand how to solve some of our problems in healthcare, I think the first question we have to address is why we are sick. We must understand the cause. And before we get into this, I want to ask you a few questions. Are you happy as you sit here with the way you feel? Are you happy with the way you feel physically, with the way you feel emotionally, and the way you feel spiritually? Well, why do we ask this question? Well, whenever we ask a question, the part of our brain called the hippocampus, the search engine, gets turned on. And right now, as this question goes through your brain, you're turning on all sorts of neurocircuits that's been there your entire life. You become now more engaged in what's going on. So I want you to ask that question to have you become engaged. And another question, would you like a change in your life? Would you be willing to change your life? And this might include a reduction in medications. Would you like to feel more energetic or improve your relationships? Or perhaps you would like to have a greater purpose in life. Well, today, in a short period of time, we want to craft a plan to improve your life. And in working with patients every day, I can remember years ago, I tried to do everything at once in getting someone healthy, and it just did not work. I learned that it was a journey, and you don't go to A to Z all at once. You go from A to B to B to C. You go one step at a time. You also don't climb a mountain all at once. You just move it up one step at a time, but eventually you reach your goal. And when you look back, you can see why the journey occurred. So I begin to learn that having good health is not necessarily something that happens all at once. It's a journey. And the first step in our journey together I'd like to take you on is how I arrived at my place today. Well, I was practicing medicine. I can remember I was practicing medicine in Cincinnati. And I was getting very discouraged there. You know, it was fun the first few years out, shocking patients and doing stents and all these acute procedures. That was fun for a while. But the patients kept coming back. They kept coming back for another procedure or another medicine. They weren't getting well. Well, it didn't take me very long to realize I didn't have the right tools to do the job. Well, they had prepared me in medical school to do the best I could, but I still didn't have the tools that I needed. Something was missing. So I began to look for a new textbook, and that led me to the Bible. And as I studied the Bible, I realized that there were truths in the Bible that I could apply to my patient's life. And I looked at the evidence behind the scriptures, and then I figured out ways to apply them to my patients' lives, and guess what? The patients started getting better. They started not coming back as much. They started needing less medicines. And it was through my relationship with God, through the scriptures, that I've developed some non-traditional insights into health, and I want to share them with you today. Sound good? Because I think everyone wants to learn something new, right? Well, you ask, why should you listen to Dr. Markham? Why should you even listen to me? There are other voices out there. How many have heard of Dr. Oz? Yeah, that's a voice out there. And then there's Dr. Phil and the doctors. How about the internet? Is there some people on the internet that you could listen to? The newspaper? There's lots of voices out there. But today, as you listen, let the evidence speak for itself. Let the evidence, and more than that, there's an authoritative voice that's going to be here guiding your thoughts today. Listen to that voice. Listen to that voice. Well, we're going to answer in our first period of time together this question, why we are sick. We can never really solve a problem unless we understand why. Then we can craft a solution. And guess what? We're not only going to tell everyone why they're sick, but we're going to give everyone the solution today. Did that sound good? Yes. Are you with me today? Does that sound good? Yes. Okay. Why are we sick? We're going to answer that question. Well, it seems like there is so much stress in the world. If you look at all the wars going on right now, we talk about Syria and what's going on in Ukraine and the Middle East. This is just to name a few of the wars we're knowing about. And how about all the natural disasters, the floods, the hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, and just recently we even had snowstorms. We didn't quite have a snowstorm here though. And then if that wasn't enough, there's all the earthly stress that we have. We have these viruses going around the earth. We have pollution. We have the greenhouse effect and the famines that's going on. The lack of clean water, contaminated food, and the list goes on and on. And these stress affect some people in the world more than others. If that wasn't enough, there's the personal stress. And that might be from relationships. How many people have ever had a stress at the job? Well, some people have some of the best jobs in the world. I want to talk to you afterwards. How many have had stress from having a health problem? Then there's the economic stress. You know, I don't have enough money to pay the bills. Has anyone ever had that stress? And then one of the most dangerous and worst stresses of all is having spiritual stress. And those that have felt that stress know what I'm talking about. If that wasn't enough stress in the world, then there's the personal stress. The stresses that we may not even be able to see that into our lives. This might be genetic stress. This might be, and excuse me, Jason, the stress from too much media. Did you know the average person spends 12 hours in media a day? And all of these inputs into our bodies either makes us better or makes us worse. It either causes us stress and brings us to healing and wellness, or it brings us the other direction. And the question I want to again ask you, are you accumulating stress from this world today? And do you realize that this stress changes the physiology of the body? Every input we put in our body either makes us better or worse. And that could include what we breathe, what we put on our bodies, what we smell, what we hear, and the processes that happen in our brain. Did you realize that everything that's ever brought into the brain is stored in your hippocampus for the rest of your life? Some of it comes up occasionally, some of it doesn't. But if you look at it, the stress over time has definitely risen in our world. We have more stressors now than ever before. The stresses that we recognize, the disasters, the famines, the personal stresses, but also the hidden stressors that we don't even know that are out there. And over the past 25 years in my practice, I have seen the rates of cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, mental health, all the chronic diseases continue to rise. Nothing seems to get better. So follow me here. Chronic stress of the world, chronic disease. They keep going up. And yet the prescriptions, the over-the-counter medications, all the money that's spent on improving our health, this broken system is being perpetuated. It's not working. And one of the reasons it's not working because it's not defining the problem of why we are sick. For 20 years, Michelle worked as an executive assistant at a very prominent company. And she loved her job. It was a great job. She got to help out doing some important things every day. And she had a certain office attire that you had to wear. I don't know about you, but some of you have to wear a certain uniform, a certain presentation at work. Nowadays, where I'm working, they're asking me to wear a badge every day. So I'm trying to do that. But Michelle was expected to wear these business suits, high heel shoes, and she looked the part, and she actually loved it. But over 20 years in the high heel shoes, guess what happened? She reflected the company's image well, but her left foot began to hurt a lot. How many have ever had problems wearing high heels? Yeah, you know that they can cause problems over time. Well, Michelle hurt the back of her left foot called the calcaneus. And she'd really never been sick before. She's only in her 40s, and it hurt a lot. When the feet aren't happy, nothing's happy. Nothing's happy. And her foot started bothering her a whole lot, and she went to see a foot doctor, a podiatrist. And the podiatrist says, yep, Michelle, your calcaneus has some problems. You need to have an operation. So she had the operation on her foot, but that didn't really help very much. During the time Michelle had all of her pain, she started eating some comfort foods to feel better. And she gained a few pounds. She quit going to the gym. And after a couple months of this, Michelle started to have some problems. The foot pain, the extra weight, she started having to go to the bathroom, real thirsty all the time. And she went to her doctor and they measured a hemoglobin A1C, and she had developed diabetes. Well, the doctor put her on a medicine called metformin. Unfortunately, the metformin made Michelle hungry. And Michelle started to eat more, especially more processed foods. And guess what happened next? Her blood pressure went up. So she went to the doctor, and the doctor says, well, you know what, Michelle, your blood pressure's up. Let me put you on a medicine called lisinopril. It's good with diabetes. Well, her blood pressure still didn't go down. The pain was driving it up as well. And he said, well, let me put you on another one called Norvasc. Well, the Norvasc caused her to swell a little bit in her legs, and she didn't like that. So he gave her another one called hydrochlorothiazide to take the fluid out. And guess what? Not only it took the fluid out, but it took her potassium and magnesium out as well. So she had to take some supplements for that. Well, she didn't sleep well at night. She was diagnosed because she had extra tissue around her neck of having sleep apnea. And because she wasn't sleeping well, her doctor gave her a sleeping pill. In the morning time, she started taking 5-hour energy drinks because she was so tired she needed to get going for work to keep the company image, which was down the tubes because she's wearing a boot now. And the 5-hour energy drink made her heart race. She went back to her doctor because of her racing heart, and he said, well, I have a medication to help you. Let me try you on a beta blocker. Well, the pain still wasn't better. Things weren't healing up. Michelle was now on quite a few medications, so she started to take a stronger pain medicine. Unfortunately, she had to take a narcotic. The narcotic started to slow down her bowels. She went back to work with the boot on, not feeling well. She wasn't thinking as clearly anymore. And guess what? Her boss said, Michelle, listen, this isn't good. We're going to have to let you go. You're not meeting the image anymore. So Michelle was fired. Then things got worse. The narcotics slowed down her bowel. She got an infection called diverticulitis. She had to take a medication, an antibiotic for that. But the antibiotic for the diverticulitis caused the bowel flora to change, and a bacteria in her bowel called C. difficile grew up and caused another infection. If this wasn't enough, Michelle, 42 years old, have all this happening, now unemployed from a job she really liked, and her foot still hurt. She began to get depressed. I would too. I'm depressed just talking about it. She went and saw her doctor, who sent her to a psychiatrist. Psychiatrists are great people. Saw the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said, Michelle, you need a medication for depression. It wasn't long before Michelle started having chest pain, and that's when she saw me. As I heard this true story a few years ago, I was just amazed. 12, 13 medications on someone who 2 years before was on nothing just because she had worn some high heel shoes? Well, I said, Michelle, I don't mean to be critical, but we might have bypassed this entire cascade of events if a few years ago you started wearing flats. Unfortunately, I have heard variations of Michelle's story far too many times. Too many times. But fortunately, Michelle is doing better. She's on nothing now, 2 years later, because her foot got better. Which begs the question, are you accumulating stress physiology that will damage your body some ways and that you don't even see or recognize? The simplest actions and thoughts taken outside of our original design have consequences. Now, high heel shoes are not necessarily a bad thing, but if I wore them day in and day out, year in and year out, they would eventually cause stress to my body and cause something bad to happen. So we've tossed this word around called stress in relationship to why we're sick. So let's talk about a definition of stress. What does it mean? Well, a simple definition of chronic stress is any physiologic change that occurs when we stray from our original design. Now, I had to take a trip to Illinois a few weeks ago, and I was stressed a little bit. And I got in my car. I have a Volkswagen Passat, and that's another whole story. And I got in the car, and the red light came on saying something was wrong with the engine. Now, I'm not a mechanic, and I don't know so I called. I said, listen, I looked in the book, and it says you can drive your car, but I was nervous. So I said, I'm going to Illinois. I am not going to drive the Passat. So my friend Nick, who was going with me, he agreed that wasn't the best idea either to drive the Passat. So I said, let's get a rental car, Nick. That's a good idea. So I went down to the airport, went to the Alamo, and he said, well, what's your problem? I said, well, my Passat's not good. He says, well, I guess you wouldn't want that vehicle. No. I'll take, what do you have? He says, I have a Camry. And I said, well, that's good. I'm a big fellow. That's plenty of room. It'll get me to Illinois. So he started explaining to me about this car for this short journey. I was just going to go to Illinois, stay for 2 days, and come back. So he was telling me about this car. And the first thing he brought me out this form that I had to fill out. Are you going to bring the car back full with gasoline or not? Who's going to pay if something happens? Do you have insurance? Then he walked me around the car and I looked to see if there's anything wrong with it. And the next thing he said, well, here's the owner's manual. If anything happens, here's some numbers you can call. You know, I was getting stressed by this. There's so much just to renting a car. Well, God also has given us a vehicle to take us on a journey. And our vehicle is designed in a certain manner as well that's governed by natural laws. If everyone doesn't breathe for a few minutes here, there's going to be some problems. Everyone had lunch? You don't eat? Blood sugar goes down? There are some problems there. Newton says you jump off a cliff and something's going to break. Well, when we go against natural laws, natural design, when we go against our owner's manual, there's always some degrees of stress. Now, if we look about, we said that, stress is causing a problem. We talked a little about chronic disease, but let's see how modern medicine is approaching things. Well, let's look at history. Let's see how we've done through history. 51 years ago, 1965, Lyndon Baines Johnson, president. Well, we had about 600,000 deaths from cardiovascular disease, 600,000 deaths from cancer. We see the number of deaths from strokes. That was before modern medicine, before technology, before we had a lot of pharmaceuticals. We moved to 1975, 10 years of development. We see technology has grown. We now have put a man on the moon. What technology? We're starting to develop television and modern media. Still don't have cell phones, do we? But technology has increased. Well, we see in America that year about 2.3 million deaths in America. We still have the same amounts of deaths from heart disease, about the same from cancer and stroke. We moved to 2005, 2.4 million deaths in America. We see the numbers from heart disease, cancer, and strokes, they're all about the same. But now we're starting to have new diseases. We have a new disease that's shown up called Alzheimer's disease, dementia. We also have the disease that shows up that's now labeled disease called obesity. Well, some people say, well, the population has gone up. We're actually living longer. Well, that's an argument there, but if you look at the statistics, the same amount of people are dying. We have more chronic disease than ever. How are we doing with our problems? Well, there is a place for modern medicine, don't get me wrong. If I'm having a heart attack, give me a stent. If my heart's going too slow, I want to have a pacemaker. If I'm bleeding to death, please sew me up. How many have had an operation without anesthesia? If my heart's weak, I definitely want a defibrillator, and if I have a bad infection, it's bacterial, give me an antibiotics. So the place for modern medicine seems to be for acute problems, to get you over the hump so you can figure out the cause why we're sick. And if you look at the evidence, the numbers really don't support much progress in healing. We're spending a lot of money. We're not getting a lot of value. 1 in every $5 spent on health care. If we're getting graded, you must, as you think logically, you say, the current system is just not working. We have a disconnect here. And there is a difference between modern medicine, which treats acute problems very well, and healing. Healing focuses on the cause. Well, I hope I've given you a little evidence at history to see how it's helped us, but let's go back a little bit further in history. What more can we learn? Well, let's go back to the time of George Washington in the 1770s. Well, in George Washington's time, he got sick and he had a bevy of doctors around him, and they decided to put leeches on him to pull blood out of his body. And he had half of his blood volume removed by leeches. He didn't get better. Go figure. And if I would have been one of the doctors on the staff there and said, listen, guys, I just don't think it's good that we put another leech on George. He's not heading in the right direction. They would have probably asked me to leave the room. How many here have had a toothache before? Well, for many years, the treatment for toothache was cocaine. And cocaine is still being used today, but it's usually not for toothaches. How about cigarettes? In the 1930s, the Journal of the American Medical Association suggested that the best treatment for asthma was to smoke a cigarette. Wow. Well, if you look at even going further back, it must admit, if you don't follow the crowd, you might be heading in the right direction. Think about that for a second. Well, about 2,000 years ago, we had another healer out there, another ultimate physician. He didn't follow the crowd, and I'm suggesting that he was probably heading in the right direction. What is the crowd doing today? I wrote a book a few years ago, Medicines That Kill. And I was curious because I saw medicines hurting a lot of people. And in that book, I did the data, and medicines were killing more people every year in America than heart disease. And I showed all the research, and the pharmaceutical industry really didn't pick up on it. They didn't want to hear about it. You know, whether it be from overdoses or inappropriate use or mistakes that are made. And, you know, in the book I talked, the number one cause of fatal stomach bleeding was a medication called a non-steroidal. The number one cause of liver failure needing transplantation was acetaminophen. And then I looked at all the medications through the years, from Vioxx to Cisapride to Fen-Phen, that have been pulled off the market because it was killing people. That's just to name a few, not to mention all those that need to be pulled off. The overuse of narcotics now. We hear about people overdosing on narcotics almost every day. The dangers of medicines for weight loss, the antibiotics and antibiotic resistance, and the 4 billion prescriptions written in the United States, more than the rest of the earth combined, doesn't seem to be solving our problems. I go to the internet, the newspaper, hear about cure after cure, but I want to ask you today, what is the evidence showing? Do those in charge of healing really understand? And it appears that for chronic conditions, we're merely meeting symptoms. And if you have chronic stressors, whether that's from the world, whether you're having a famine in your life, whether you're having personal stresses, whether you have stresses you don't even know about, or genetic stress, if these accumulate over time, sooner or later you develop a symptom. That symptom, like Michelle, might lead to a disease. That disease leads to a medication, and then you might have a ripple effect going on. Well, our body handles whatever stress that comes our way in the same way chemically. We turn on, our brain says, we just have to stay alive. I want to stay alive, keep me alive. So we do what we say is we downshift. We go to the part of the brain that we share with reptiles. We just want to stay alive. It makes chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol and the inflammatory markers. And if a bus is heading my way, it gives me the ability to jump out of the way right quick. It saves my life in an emergency. I call this our brain downshifts. We focus on just staying alive. This is the selfish part of the brain we share with animals. It's not the higher part, the upshifting part, the prefrontal cortex that we're going to talk about a little bit later. Well, we make all these stress chemicals to keep us alive no matter what type of stress. So we have a little bit of world stress, a little environmental stress, a little bit of relationship stress, some genetic stress, stress that we don't even recognize. And sooner or later, this stress causes these chemicals, the cortisol and epinephrine, to occur. And guess what happens? We're damaged. Our body becomes damaged, even our DNA. We're now learning that stress chronically can damage our DNA. We call the study of this epigenetics. And sooner or later, we have symptoms. Then guess what? We have treatment. And so far, our treatments for chronic disease has been medications. And sometimes those treatments can actually be worse than what's causing it. Well, I think you get the picture of what I'm trying to paint in your mind today. And to make matters worse, when our body's under stress, our brains aren't thinking as good. Have you ever been in a fight with somebody? Oh, you did this. No, I didn't. Oh, yes, you did. No, I didn't. Well, when our brains are under stress, our cognitive abilities go down quite a bit. We just don't think as well. So when a body's under chronic stress, the body just wants to be safe. It's making all these safe chemicals. The brain's not thinking good. So let's find something else to cope with. How about some cigarettes, some alcohol? How about let's turn to drugs? Or let's just veg out all day and do nothing. Or in my case, let's go to the Krispy Kreme. Everyone has chronic stress. Well, as you're sitting here, there's some biometrics of chronic stress that we can look at. How might you know if you're under stress today? Well, is your heart rate going up from increased adrenaline? Is your blood pressure higher? The blood sugar might be high. Are you having problems sleeping at night? Are you more irritable? Are you having symptoms of depression? Your brain's not working right. Are you having more infections as usual because of a weaker immune system? In the blood, we can actually measure substances like C-reactive protein. We can look at the white blood cells and learn. But chronic stress even changes our very DNA. Our telomeres, the aging parts of our DNA, get smaller as we age. Well, today I want to give you something you can do right now to help if I've stressed you out by talking about stress. I want everyone here to take a deep breath, hold it for 3 seconds, and blow it out slow. Now close your eyes and do it. Take a deep breath, 1001, 1002, and blow it out slow. If you will do that 10 times, you will start to turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, which will counteract stress. My mom is here today. She used to say, Jim, when you're stressed, take some deep breaths and relax. Well, there's real physiology behind that. So that's one thing I want to leave you here. When you start feeling some of these biometrics of stress, practice taking some deep breathing. We don't breathe well anymore. When we're under stress, we breathe quicker. And I'm going to give you something else to do besides understanding why we're sick in this first time together. Everyone likes babies, right? Who doesn't like a baby? Let's stand up if you don't like babies. So I wanted to put something on that would decrease our stress, and that's baby. And this is a baby friend of mine named Hayden. And I've had the privilege of seeing Hayden grow up. I've watched his development, watched him start to smile, turn from side to side, sit up, he rolls over, start to sit in a chair, puts his fingers in his mouth, in his nose, and other parts of his body. His daddy's back there somewhere. Nick is back there. This is his son. Nick is very proud of Hayden, and so am I. Well, his development has been one step at a time. Hayden did not hit the ground at running. He started to walk very slowly. But notice, there was always someone there holding his hands. So we've learned about why we're sick. We've learned about something we can do if we are sick. Now, the second step today in this first seminar is I want you to know what you can do, another thing you can do right now. And I want you to think about making a commitment. We've learned about the cause, and we will discover in the next 2 seminars the solution to chronic stress. We've taken some immediate symptoms to deal with the stress we might have induced today by deep breathing and looking at a baby. That might turn down some stress a little bit. But now I want you to commit to the ultimate solution for chronic stress. So why we are sick? It's because of all the stress in the world. And the solution for that is going to be biblical prescriptions for life. And we're going to go over the solutions. But let me summarize. Most of our sickness comes from chronic stress. It occurs when we stray from our original design at many different levels. It's cumulative. The same chemistry's turned on, affecting every cell of the body, from the brain on down. And often, as we talked about, we might recognize the world stress, the wars, the famines. We might recognize some personal stresses, but often we don't even recognize that we under extreme stress until a symptom develops. And we're going to learn more about the solution in the next 2 seminars, but the solution to chronic stress is to implement biblical prescriptions for life.
And we hope that was a blessing to you today. There's so many things out there telling us what we need to do about our health, but really looking to God and always holding on to His hands is one of the best things we can do. And if you enjoyed the presentation, we ask you to go to biblicalprescriptions.com/podcast, where you can learn more about the concept of using biblical prescriptions for your health. And if you really liked what Dr. Markham had to say, we ask you to share this on social media. Leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you listen to this. And that'll help spread the good news of healing to others who are searching. So thanks again for listening. I'm your host, Nick Evanson, inviting you to join us again next week for another podcast where we're going to discuss more about getting well and going home.